These are just some of the articles that were written on my innovative technologies and my vision over the years. But do they hold any value other than being sentimental? Hey guys, I hope you've been keeping positive and motivated. If this is your first time here, I am Thor and I share my experience as part of my Life After Failure series to entertain, encourage and inspire you and people all around the world. The first time I was featured in a newspaper, I was 27 years old, which seems a long time ago now. But in any case, I received a phone call by a reporter from the local newspaper and she asked if she could write a story on us. We were living in a tiny little village with probably no more than 50 houses. The newspaper, however, was relatively big, reporting on a wider area. She had heard about the engine we were developing and wanted to find out more about it. Of course I agreed, and after the interview she had told me how nervous she was for this interview as she was worried she wouldn't understand the technical parts. She wasn't the only one nervous though. I was too. At this time we were already preparing ourselves to go on our first tour to Bolivia, which made the story quite an exciting one. I was so optimistic and hopeful that someone would see the article and get in touch wanting to work with us and continue to fund our developments. Something like that actually happened. But let me just take a minute and explain what problems we actually try to solve with our technologies. So my father and I started working on the concept idea of the TU523 that was first called the Microplane. My father used to travel regularly between our homes in Germany and England by Ryanair and realized that the most flexible means of transport is still the car, despite Ryanair's unbeatable airfare costs. As long as there's a suitable road to drive on, you can get a point-to-point connection. The problem with airports is that you first need to get there. So for us, this was a 1.5 hour journey in Germany and another 2.5 hour journey in England. The idea of the TU523 was to change that with vertical takeoff and landing capabilities. We would be able to go point to point without the need for new and expensive infrastructure and would especially not have to rely on airport infrastructure. Vertical takeoff and landing aircraft is nothing new. Whilst there are few in development right now, the Osprey with its VTOL capabilities is probably the most famous one built. But even in Germany, VTOL aircrafts were in development. The Dornier Do 31 with its first flight in February 1967, for example. The problem is the aircraft demonstrated very low payloads and were just not commercially viable. By making the TU523 a hybrid electric aircraft propelled by 16 electric turbines that would be gimbal mounted to the fuselage so that they have full maneuverability and reaction speed within split seconds, we were certain that this could be produced at a fraction of the cost of conventional aircraft and make transportation a commercially viable option. Also, while many companies are hailing their goals to transporting passengers, the market for transporting goods is much greater. And we saw a gap in the market, especially in developing countries that do not have an infrastructure network like we do here in Europe or other developed countries, which has for decades limited their economic growth. For this reason, we focused on the TU523 to be an aircraft to transport freight in form of shipping containers rather than passengers. There was a problem though. The generator to deliver the necessary energy to the electric turbines during takeoff, flight and landing did not exist. And it took a lot of research and experimentation until we found a design that promised an enormous power-to-weight ratio while also promising near to zero emissions. Conventional engines use a crankshaft that are and have to be very heavy. But we were certain that there must be a way we could eliminate the need for a crankshaft. Without going into too much detail, the RT was conceptualized and instead of a heavy crankshaft we would use a sinus disc that would reduce the weight of the entire engine significantly. We were also able to address the efficiency issues. Conventional engines lose around 40% in efficiency through heat transfer without even considering the losses through the exhaust heat. Anyway, we designed a piston within piston design that allows the heat from the combustion to be transferred into a steam chamber, allowing us to harvest additional energy from the heat that is wasted in a conventional system. The TU523 became an application of the RT, and we discovered many more areas where the RT can be applied to produce energy effectively, clean and affordably. The design of the RT is also scalable, so that you could power a vehicle or megawatt producing power plant. It was the RT that we presented to Bolivia's president Evo Morales at the time, which I made a whole video series about, and I will link that down in the description below. So that is the general gist of the tech that we were working on, and there were definitely several obstacles to jump along the way. But before we get into that, back to the articles and the phone calls that I was hoping for. I don't actually know how they found this article for the Euskirchen newspaper that only has a population of around 60,000 people. But in any case, I received this phone call from Austria, from 3 guys. 2 of them were engineers and the other one had connection to investment and money, which all sounded quite promising. I met my father and these guys in Austria to see if something would come of it. Unfortunately, nothing serious ever developed from this meeting, although I'm still in contact with one of those guys today. Between then and now, there have been many more articles written about my vision and the solutions that we were trying to bring to the market. And I felt privileged. Some publications and online articles were published by some quite prominent publishers. However, when you run out of money and forced into a corner and no one engages and wants to be involved, well, actually, people wanting to get involved was never really an issue. A lot of people wanted to, but there were mostly people just wanting to jump on the bandwagon. Anyway, I hope you get the gist. To continue our development, we needed money, which I didn't have anymore, and didn't get from the articles that were published, however prominent the magazine might have been. With all that said, the BBC was very keen on featuring us, which of course is another league entirely. But it was under the condition that we could show them our TU523 in flight. But just as we received our new circuit boards, maxing out my credit card, my software engineer left the business, and it left me with a lot of components, a great vision for the future of VTOL aviation, but no one to support me realize it. And just to clarify, I don't want to make my software developer look bad in any way. He's been extremely supportive over the time we were working on the TU523 in 2014 and 15. And it was just bad timing. As I had mentioned in many of my previous videos, the loss of my father was difficult for me to handle. And I did make many mistakes, one of them maybe not having been able to build a stronger network during the development. As such, my biggest regret, as much as I dislike using the word, is not having had the courage of utilizing the power of video and YouTube to the max a lot earlier. However, there are many other factors to the story as to why we haven't been successful, but I will have to cover those in a separate video that I'm already working on now. These articles are nice to look at. And it's a reminder of some of the best times, but also some of the worst times. But maybe, most importantly, they spark this little voice in me. Hey, get up. You're not done yet. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. I do really appreciate it. And the only thing left to say is stay positive and stay motivated, and I shall see you in the next one.